Welcome to Rethink Talks. I am your host, Alicia Castillo Holley, bringing you real-life conversations from Silicon Valley or somewhere around the world. We will talk about disruptors, angel investments, venture capital, and of course, family offices. Join me along with my children, their families, friends, disruptors, and investors as we explore the fascinating world of creating wealth in a completely different and authentic way. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Wealthing podcast. I am so happy and excited to have Connie Bowen here. I met Connie several years ago. We share a passion for agriculture, and I think what her views are about progress, investments, agriculture, food, and safety are just amazing. Connie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Excited to chat.
Yeah. So Connie, let's start with how did you get here?
How did I get here? I have kind of always been obsessed with food. I would say that is like kind of my gateway into agriculture or ag tech investment. Yeah, like I ate all the green beans in my dad's garden as like a toddler, and like that kind of hasn't stopped. I almost did kind of the culinary thing and work, I love working back of house in restaurants, and sometimes I say if the world were better, that's probably what I would do. But I grew up in the New Jersey suburbs. I was good at math and I was good at school, so I studied engineering because I think that's just kind of like the rational trajectory to go on. And I guess kind of engineering plus food, plus I was, good and stressed about climate change from a young age. And I think kind of that intersection just is ag tech, right? So I got really lucky that I was building food computers when I was in college, which in hindsight, it's hilarious the number of folks who have pitched me a very similar version to the thing that like I built as a pretty mediocre undergrad engineer in like a basement. Yeah, I was building food computers kind of like pre-vertical farming bubble. And that got me into kind of entrepreneurship. I don't think I knew what the word meant. I stumbled into a fellowship program called Venture for America. And it's focused on economic development via entrepreneurship in cities like St. Louis, Detroit, Baltimore. I live in St. Louis. I've lived in St. Louis since I graduated college. My whole family is like New York City centric. So, yeah, I could get into that too, but I ended up working in St. Louis at one of the first ag tech venture funds, the Yield Lab. And I just got lucky that I got thrown in the deep end and was like immediately drinking from the fire hose right when ag tech was kind of taking off. And, that's when we were like, should we call it agritech, agrifoodtech? I don't know. And yeah, I fell in love with it, and I've been investing in ag tech and trying to really, more than be an investor, I never wanted to work in finance. I'm trying to resource solutions that improve our agricultural systems. And that's the short version of kind of how I got here.
Oh, you can give us a long version.
Longer version.
Give us some juicy parts.
Yeah, I mean, well, so I worked. I spent. So I got to do this fellowship, Venture for America, which was so well aligned and with, I think, just kind of how I thought about the world, which is I'm pretty impact and service oriented, I guess, just by default. But I'm also very math engineer brain. And it's been interesting because I've definitely evolved my kind of prioritization stack. I guess as in the past like decade of my career or so. I definitely kind of started at like food, right? I love delicious food. I love preparing it. Like definitely that is one of my favorite world. I make very good Christmas cookies for my LPs, so like that should be known, or holiday cookies. But that's a perk of being part of Farmhand Ventures. And because I used to work as a pastry chef. And but I didn't want to just serve kind of wealthy people food as like a career. I've evolved my thinking again on the impact and influence that chefs can have on the greater food system, but that led me to focus more on kind of I think the engineering optimization side of food production. So as I was building food computers and kind of looking at early vertical farming space, I grew up in New Jersey and New York City suburbs where land is expensive. I think since then have gotten quite a bit of a reality check. The US is big and sun is a lot cheaper than electricity. So vertical farming economics are challenged.
Yeah.
I have not ever invested in that space, I will note. And as I was, and I just got really lucky, honestly. Like I grew up in sort of Wall Street suburbs, so I didn't want to work in finance. I noticed that kind of looking around me, my dad's an investment banker, looking around me, like it didn't seem to be making people happy, and it didn't seem to be necessarily creating the type of change I'd like to see in the world. So kind of despite my best efforts, I ended up working, and I know that this is such a privileged thing to say, it is so lucky to just stumble into your first job in venture capital. But I just got really lucky and I stumbled into this role at the Yield Lab when we were one of, if not the first ag tech VCs, accelerators. And I loved it. I love trying to apply impact investing framework on the work we were doing. I'm obviously math brained and I'm also hyper competitive. So I do like the kind of like get the best returns element of, of investing. But and I like trying to, actually quantify and measure impact and understanding what the positive and negative side effects of different types of technology adoption are. And then I'd say like one other kind of poor thing about how I ended up at Farmhand and like how I think about the world today is I was watching ag tech investment increase like almost every year except for the past 3 years. It's been kind of bad.
Yeah.
2.5 maybe. But almost every year in my career, I just watched ag tech investment increase. But I didn't see on-farm adoption correlate at all. And I thought that's going to catch up with us at some point. And I worked on a farm the summer after high school in France. Which is how I learned that I don't speak French very well.
What part of France?
Outside of Lyon. So
Okay.
yeah, largely like biodynamic raspberry farms. That was an interesting chapter of my memoir, I think we could say. And I worked on another goat farm in Oregon, and but basically those were kind of like crunchy farms is how I would describe them. And I just knew I needed to learn more about production agriculture. So I actually left VC, joined a really boutique farmland investment hedge fund, with kind of a solo GP controlling it, and was kind of brought on to help spin up a company to vertically integrate some of our products because if you look at the food, you know this obviously because you've been in ag too, but if you look at the food system, one of the core issues we have is how low farm margins are and what a small percentage of the food dollar farmers get, which is like farmers get 8 to 14% of your food dollar, and I don't think most people appreciate that. And so vertical integration and moving some of the higher value processing, packaging, et cetera stuff can really improve your margins if you own farmland or trying to get value from the stuff you're producing on that land, right? So that was I moved to rural Oregon. I lived in Willamette Valley. I joked that I was social distancing kind of before it was cool. This was pre-COVID.
Where was this?
Huh?
Where was this?
In Willamette Valley. So outside of basically in Albany. It's kind of the bigger town nearby. Yeah, we had 6 properties out there. We did blueberries and hazelnuts and a little bit of hemp because this was 2018, 19, and this is when everyone was betting losing their shirt, really, in cannabinoidal kind of. So not THC, but CBD hemp stuff. And yeah, and we were very conservative in the way we approached that, for the record. But yeah, I mean, while I was out there, I was like living alone with my dog in the middle of nowhere, which was, I think, it's one of those things you don't know until you know, right? And like I know working back of house in restaurants is hard and gratifying and hard, and I know what the wages are. And I think farm work is harder. And that's like really saying something. And again, like I'm the kind of part of the reason that I'm able to take risks is I could be quite happy going and working in a manual labor job and making kind of reasonable, normal people wages. But when I was out in Oregon, I basically realized, whoa, the entire problem in our food system, it's not pollution, it's not environmental stuff, it's labor. That's the entire problem. And we can get into all of the isms that are intertwined in that. But I mean, if you really step back, the entire history of humanity has only ever worked because we have relied upon exploiting people who have less than full citizenship rights to do the work that enables us to have affordable nutrition. That is how our food system works. And, also it's complicated, and reality says that maybe we've needed to do it that way, actually, so far. I can give lots of anecdotes of my time spent working alongside and managing, hundreds of folks that in that part of the world are just referred to as the Mexicans, because we had a largely Oaxacan workforce crew, but just the blatant racism really and sexism that you encounter is pretty disappointing, to say the least, and also pretty motivating on my end of what I'm kind of doing today, because I think that I am a mechanical engineer by academia. I like robots and stuff. And so
There's a little bit of a bias there.
I am biased there. I'm definitely biased towards like mechanized systems. Also, like, who doesn't love, like, farmers love equipment too, right? Like, equipment is fun.
Oh, I love those things.
Yeah.
And not only that, farmers love innovating and doing things that would remove them from doing things.
Exactly. As do farm workers, I'll point out. And I think that there's like an interesting, how do we define farmer versus farm worker thing? But basically, while I was there, I was like, wow, like, why are we not talking about this? Like, labor is obviously the whole thing. The reason is it's a political landmine, right? To me, it's one that's very much worth maybe accidentally stepping on a few times, and it's definitely what I'll be working on. I have no delusions that this is a problem that just gets solved. But if I can help some of my former colleagues afford shoes for their kids and have a lower risk of death at work, that's kind of a W. So I think I started Farmhand like 2 or 3 years ago because I think we're at a really interesting moment in time where for the first time we can leverage technology to actually make agricultural labor an attractive career. And that's really necessary too, because we're living in a world where we've got a massively aging farming and farm worker population. Anyway, I can go on like an extremely long labor rant, but the high level is we've got a really interesting opportunity to create socioeconomic opportunities for the folks who do the work to feed us. We won't necessarily take that opportunity, I would say, as investors in tech. I'm going to do everything I can to push us towards doing it, but I don't think that many folks are thinking about how farm workers engage with ag tech products, which is just purely capitalistically stupid, because stuff doesn't work well if users don't like it. Like, that's that end game is farm workers can break ag tech adoption and practice change like no other element of the system. And then obviously there's all sorts of moral reasons that we should consider that. But
we need to eat.
We need to eat, especially crops, so fruit, veg, nuts. That's all the most labor intensive stuff. We're talking about somewhere between 40 and 80% of annual operating budget on farms. That's labor. So basically at Farmhand, we invest in solutions that make work suck less for the folks who do it. We look at that like directly, and we also look at it indirectly, right? So we're looking at it as the bottleneck. And so, for example, we are invested in a hemp genetics company, which you might look at and say, I don't really understand how hemp seeds help with the labor problem. But it's a really interesting sustainable aviation fuel feedstock. Hemp is way lower input in terms of fertilizer, water than soy or corn. And there's a reason we call it weed. It grows real easily. Um, and but one of the challenges I've invested in possibly an irresponsible number of novel crop companies over the years through with the Yield Lab and Ag Launch and stuff. And it's really, really, really hard to bring a new crop to market and create a new supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. And you want to take all of the hard elements out that you can. And one element is the actual cultivation tasks. And so everyone in the US and the Midwest who grows corn, soy, wheat has a combine. They're using combines to do everything. We've effectively almost mechanized row crop production. And that's why we've got more, that's chicken or egg here, but that's part of why it's there. You see much more row crop acreage in the US than you see veg acreage, right? And it's very difficult to say, hey, plant this new crop, and also you need to invest in this new system to plant it and get it out, et cetera. Well, New West Genetics hemp, in addition to being double the protein and oil yield, is combinable, is what I say. So do a slight header adjustment on your combine and boom, you can actually rotate this thing in with corn and soy in a almost no-brainer way, which is necessary to create large-scale adoption of a novel crop. So again, we're looking at labor like directly in the obvious ways with automation, though with the caveat that I believe people will be working in fields for the rest of my life. I'm only 31 and plan to live a long time, so like I don't think that we're gonna have humanoid stuff. Yeah, I'm a baby. I don't think that we're gonna have like completely automated outdoor farms. I could get in the weeds on that, but also if we're not thinking about how, whether it's regenerative farming practices or about whatever your new kind of farming practice that would be better, if you're not thinking about how that integrates into farm operations and labor inputs, it's not going to work, period.
And then you have also, you're building a fund. So tell us about your next steps. Where are you going?
Yeah, I've been pretty deliberate. So I'm really lucky, I would say, that I was involved in building funds kind of with the Yield Lab. I was not a partner there, but I got to work really closely with them and help kind of expand. So that started as like a $3 million accelerator fund in St. Louis and then expanded into Ireland and then Argentina and then Singapore. And I got to learn some lessons along the way there in a fund that wasn't my own. And then I also got to manage operations for kind of a multifamily office that did a lot of LP investing. And that was also really helpful because I got to look at some of the realities of what, and was investing in diverse, underrepresented emerging fund managers like way before it was cool, I think. And that was great because I got to actually understand what's happening kind of in Midwest fund development, what's happening on coastal kind of traditional software venture fund returns back, even like various emergencies that happened in some of the emerging funds who had, are in less stable positions. And so I think that all enabled me to take a pretty, and again, like I don't care about being in venture capital to be in venture capital. I am incredibly competitive and I'm good at math, and I will do better than what I promise or die trying, kind of. But I think it let me kind of sit back in like 2022 when I left Ag Launch to start Farmhand, to say, okay, what is like the best thing to set up here that is going to enable me to prove that including the folks who do the work in ag tech development and investment is going to drive alpha. And how can I do that in a way that is going to let me have a sustainable operations team? Because I think one of the things I've observed that sometimes happens is like, you can like raise fund one or two on kind of like a lot of hype and excitement. And then it gets really, really hard when you don't have necessarily returns. And by then you've got, team members who are relying on you for and I just didn't want to build that way. I also know that it takes longer to get outcomes in agriculture. And I am when you look at the landscape, ag is overly dependent on M&A for exits, and those exits are generally happening at like in the hundreds of millions range, usually low hundreds of millions, if even that. And so I wanted to be very intentional and pragmatic about how I designed a fund structure. And I kind of tried to find a sweet spot where I'm not doing too much market education because that doesn't work for fundraising.
Yeah.
I'm not independently wealthy, so I can't start with a giant pool, like family office kind of evergreen structure. And what I landed on is what I'm doing, which is a 25 million target fund that incorporates a blend actually of equity and redeemable equity. So kind of a hybrid debt equity structure that I could double click on if you want. And focusing on what I'm good at, right? So we've got a concentrated portfolio strategy. We'll do like 20 to 24 kind of total investments. I've got an operating partner who, like me, we're very hands-on at the early stages with companies, and we like to work to de-risk them. In parallel, separate from the fund, we have, over the past 3 years now, established a very, very solid partnership with the University of California Ag and Natural Resources System. So that's extension in the state of California. California produces effectively all of US specialty crops, and is, a massive agricultural economy. So this enables us to help our companies access customers who can inform us on what companies we should be investing in. And we sometimes spin up companies out of the UC system. So one of our portcos, Scout, is a UC Davis spin out that we helped from pre-company. And so, yeah, we've kind of designed a little bit of a different structure, I think, and are building a fund on top of that. Instead of just saying like, oh my gosh, how quickly can we raise a fund and have one and say we have it and say we're at first close and going. And so, yeah, we're doing the kind of raise deploy on this 25 million fund strategy, and we're trying to be really intentional about who we bring in to work with us because, like I said, I'm going to be investing and I mean investing like resources in the future of work in agriculture, hopefully for my whole career. So
your whole career. Wow, that's really good. What are the lessons for just leaving, for people who are not in that industry? What are the lessons that you've learned that they can apply to their day-to-day lives?
Just like for living, not for like direct investing, you mean?
Just for leaving.
I mean, I think we do this thing that doesn't really serve us, where we really kind of like make farmers like gods in the US, and we really romanticize farming. Farms are businesses at the end of the day, period. I think one thing that is like very grounding, at least for me, is again, like there are so many people, and like I live in St. Louis. I don't live in a rich neighborhood at all. And I think it's really helpful especially when I talk to other emerging fund managers and entrepreneurs, like oftentimes you're taking what feels like a vow of poverty to kind of like start your thing. But like my living standard is great compared to so many people. And I just think I have like a little having plenty of like I was in Sacramento 2-3 weeks ago at kind of we're working on trying to get farm workers credentialized as skilled in the state of California, which really matters because once you define farm workers skilled, right now it's unskilled, which I'm air quoting, because it is skilled work. Once we get that, it has massive ramifications for visas and for citizenship status. And so like that matters because I'm imagining that by the time I get to fund 2, 3, 4, I'm going to be backing primarily farm worker founded companies. Like that's kind of how I'm thinking about this. But one of the things that like in just talking to some of the this meetup was like 50% farm worker attendees, right? And just in talking to folks, like the thing that actually people want right now all they're asking for is like, can we get paid to work? Can we get actually paid at minimum wage, not below, because that's what's happening? And can we please work more than like 6 to 8 hours a day? We can get it. But like these baseline asks are so low. It's helpful perspective, and it's again, it's pretty motivating, I think.
That's great. Yeah, I feel the same. And I grow my veggies, and getting my hands dirty, and it just keeps me grounded. Yeah, I don't delegate that task. It's I don't know, it just keeps me grounded. So it's a pleasure to listen to you, because I did grow up in a farm. I did have a farm. I lost a farm. My parents lost a farm to political reasons. I lost a farm because I left the country, and it was also, there was a little bit of corruption there in my home country, and I do like farming, and I think it's just not very well known, and we all need to eat. So I think
It's a huge problem for society, right? Like less than 1% of Americans have any exposure to agricultural work. And like we have to try to reverse that trend a little bit, because I mean, one could argue that it leads to nutritional issues and whatnot, but like also it's leading to serious economic issues in terms of our export-import ratios are going the wrong way. And that's even before Trump tariff stuff. So yeah, it is the bedstone of kind of society.
and the other thing is that people don't know how to cook.
Yeah.
And people don't know how to eat. So it's yeah, it's just interesting. So growing your vegetables has become basil and tomatoes. And yeah, I have a funny story, but I'll say that after we wrap up. One of the questions you heard, because you've heard the other podcast, but one of the questions that I always ask people at the end is, it's a reflection about what is your legacy, and it's based on my own experience. When I was 13, I was in a coma, and then when I woke up days later, I realized that I have this gift that is life, but I'm always thinking, well, my life is going to end. I do know that I'm going to die. My grandson thinks that he doesn't want to, he's not going to die, but I do know that I am. And I ask people, so in terms of your legacy, who do you want to be when you're no longer here? Or who do you want to be when you're not here in time and space? Because for a lot of people who are listening, your words would have a long-lasting impact. So what do you want that impact to be?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I was like catching up on listening to these podcasts while also like escape. I was driving from Mississippi to St. Louis on Wednesday, which was like there was a tornado coming up from Mississippi and one coming down from St. Louis. So I was thinking about this then. I was like, here's hoping I'm driving fast enough. Might get a little real. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, again, like I say, like if the world were better, I'd work in restaurants on some level. And one of my goals for Farmhand is like, I would like, I like public speaking. I'm on podcasts and blah, 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 blah. But I'd like to get back to the back of the house. And to me, like Farmhand Ventures will be successful when I have a team that is more reflective of agricultural production, actually. And I'm working very hard to diversify ag tech. I don't think enough folks are. And but ultimately, like it's little things. I'm not so I'm a little delusional because I'm starting my own thing, but I'm not so delusional that I that I think that I'm gonna like dramatically change the world. If I can, through one of my investments, make it such that Christina or some of my former colleagues, right, farm workers, are making a couple bucks more an hour. Maybe they have health insurance. Maybe they, again, like with some of this work and skills certification, like maybe they have access to secure right to work and live in the place that they live. Like if I can have a ripple effect and make that happen for a couple people, like that's it. I don't need any credit for that. But like that's kind of how I'm motivated. Yeah. And I guess I would say the one other thing of this is like ultimately all of this is relational, right? Like I think about all of this stuff as relationships, and it's how you make people feel, and it's how you work with people and care about people. And like I love my work because there's so many people that I love in this like agriculture investment space. So I guess those are the two things.
Well, Connie, thank you so very much. It's such a pleasure to have you in the podcast. And for your listeners, please stay tuned. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to Connie. I have a similar trajectory, actually. I'm an engineer, but I'm an agronomist, and then I continue building stuff and growing still to this day. As I mentioned, I grow my food. Not all of it, but most of my fresh fruit I grow at home. And I think it's really interesting to see that not all VCs are purely focused on return. So like us, Connie is profits first, money first, but not money only. And we have a lot of room to improve the agricultural system, not only in this country, but in all the countries. So I am very happy that she had found a way to create wealth, share with everybody, including the workers. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you at the next podcast. Using Wealthing, Alicia Castillo Holley.
Thanks for tuning in to our Wealthing Talks. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. To stay connected, visit us at wealthing.com. This is Alicia Castillo Holley, your host, and until next time, yours in Wealthing.